Welcome into the Giants Hangout, brought to you by Crestron. I'm Madelyn Burke, joined by Howard Cross and Russ Salzberg. And guys, it is week one, the long-awaited week one. So much to get into this season, this week. Giants taking on the Vikings on Sunday. A lot of storylines to look at in this matchup, but also with this Giants team, of course, starting with this is the first time we're going to be seeing what this year's Giants actually look like. I know we've talked about it at length with the preseason and, how much of a just sample that is. But Russ, I know that you mentioned, Malik Neighbors, the addition of Devin Singletary, the offensive line. What are your early impressions of what this offense is going to bring?
Well, like you just said, Madelyn, we're really going to see everybody, all the pieces together come Sunday afternoon against the Vikings. But to me, it's like the old line, the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone. It's all got to work together. Dave says all the time, there is no team sport like football because it takes all 11 guys to be cohesive and work together. We can talk all we want about Malik Neighbors. That goes along with Jalen Hyatt. It goes along with Darius Slate and Wan'Dale Robinson. Daniel Jones has to get him the ball. And if this revamped offensive line holds up, I think Daniel's going to have time to get him the ball. And the other thing that drives me crazy, everybody is waiting. It's I hate to say it, a lot of it is the media that covers the Giants. They're waiting for him to do something wrong. If it throws an incomplete pass, it's a big deal. And something stuck out at the end of the Houston preseason game. You and Howard were sitting together at the end of the game, and I said, thank goodness somebody has some common sense. Howard said, after a little bit of a shaky start, I thought Daniel looked pretty good. I don't know if you remember that, Howard, but he said, I thought Daniel looked pretty good. Bumpy start, and he recovered. And to me, that's what it's all been about in preseason. When the first day of training camp, everybody was talking about, well, this pass is incomplete or that pass is incomplete. The most important thing to me was watching him run and move around. He looks really good. So I think the offensive line, it's an old cliche. I think the offense has a chance to be really good. The question is, can they stay really healthy? Because we know what poor health has done to us the past few years.
Well, that's a good point, Russ. I think, a big thing about the offenses this year is that the offensive line has looked good. And when you see it in the preseason, say in those joint practices, but in the preseason games, you didn't see a lot of sacks, a lot of pressures, a lot of hits. And that's because the guys are together playing for veterans there now. And it wasn't the starters always in those preseason games. It was the second team and the third team, and they were holding up pretty good. In the past, that wasn't the case when we played preseason games. It looked like everybody was running through. The backs were dodging people before they got the ball half the time. The quarterbacks were running for their lives. So it looks better right off the bat. So that, like I was just saying, for the last couple of years, the offensive line isn't fixed. Nothing's fixed. So as far as Daniel goes, I think Daniel's going to have a pretty good year. The only thing I worry about Daniel, and I do mean this sincerely, Daniel had a knee, he had an ACL. Have an ACL, you can't get down, you can't slide, or it's just not normal to you right away. He's going to have to figure out how to get down, how to slide when he gets in the open field. Outside of that, he's going to be pretty good. I'm telling you, he's going to have some receivers that will go get the ball now. Malik Neighbors is a really talented receiver, very talented. He says he's open all the time, even when he's not. So I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to see that. I think Singletary is going to be a great back for the thing because, again, if you're not dodging people at the line of scrimmage before you get started, you can be a good back. He's going to be a good back. It's going to be exciting to watch him. It's going to be exciting to watch Neighbors. It's going to be exciting to watch the entire offense this year, and I'm happy for him.
Howard, that's a good point that you made, though, about DJ sliding, because I think he's already the type of player who's going to want to try to get that extra 5 yards, who's going to want to kind of push through it. Oh, let me get down and protect myself, because he's a tough guy and he wants to play tough and he wants to play physical. And now coming off the ACL, like you mentioned, and the kind of the way that changes sliding or the way that your body works. And we've seen him all spring and all summer wearing that sleeve on his leg. He said he's not going to be wearing it during the games. He says he feels good. Dable's been kind of calling up a lot of live action pressure in 11 on 11 to make sure that he feels that rush and he feels that pressure, so he's ready for it when week 1 comes. But anytime, like you said, coming off an injury, and we've seen other players in other positions, Wan'Dale Robinson talked about coming off his ACL last season and how different it feels going into this year, just being fully healthy and not having to think about it. Daniel has talked about how he's not quite thinking about it, but it is still relatively fresh. I mean, this happened in week 8 of last season.
I don't know about yes, it's fresh. The part that bothers me, and Russ is in it, I don't think I've watched a lot of the practices. I watched, preseason games, everything. I never saw him slide. I just never saw him do it. And I'm thinking, you got to be able to get down. I know there's a lot of cases you can run and run over people, but you do have to get down also. And I don't know, not doing it, not practicing it, not seeing it. That would be the thing that scares me the most.
You know what, Howard? Now that you say it, I don't recall seeing him slide. Maybe like a half a slide. I'm being serious. I'm trying to recall, but I don't see that. One was, I mean, in that game again, it was like a 14-yard gain or something, kind of up the ball. That was kind of falling forward. That wasn't
kind of held him up. Right? They didn't let him go down. They didn't hit him. They kind of cuddled him like, "Hey, you okay?" So they're not gonna be doing that. Games going forward. So no.
Two things getting back to the offensive line, and it's not just that the offensive line has improved with the veterans, but you brought out a point, Howard. Even the backups, they all of a sudden everybody was complaining the last couple of years that there was no offensive line. Now there's an offensive line, but there seems to be depth along the offensive line. I'm not saying they're all Pro Bowlers and all pro or anything like that, but it just seems veteran maturity and depth. And, Madelyn, you're in that locker room with me after, and everybody else after practices. I observe, and what I've been seeing in that locker room, in particular, the group of offensive linemen, it's a very mature group. There's a lot of conversation. Guys come up to them. They talk with them. I think there's a real leadership factor. Not that there wasn't leadership last year. I read some nonsense this weekend about a toxic, dysfunctional operation that in the Daily News, which to me was a bunch of BS. Listen, when you're losing, when you're 6-11, nobody's happy. Okay. But I just think they have really good leadership this year. I think it's a good group. Now, the bottom line is what you do in a locker room doesn't matter unless you do it on the field. So you got to do it on the field.
Right. Well, and the offensive line, as you guys well know, is the one position group where it's the 5 fingers have to play as a hand, right? It's not 5 individual guys doing their individual job. It's them working as a unit and having that familiarity and building that familiarity. And we didn't see the starting offensive line unit practicing together until very late in the summer for the first time. But there is familiarity already built in there because you've got on the right side, Jermaine Illuminor and Greg Van Roten, who have familiarity there from Las Vegas. They played alongside one another in Las Vegas and under offensive line coach Carmen Bracillo, who was brought in as well, bringing in John Runyon as well to shore up the left side. Andrew Thomas, the Pro Bowl caliber left tackle. And then, of course, John Michael Schmitz, who's been dealing with a shoulder injury this summer, but he's good to go and he's ready. And I think that this offensive line, if you look at it as a unit, this starting unit seems to be a much stronger unit than we've had in years past, Howard.
Yeah, they've done, like I said again, done a great job. The coach is doing a great job. The entire group has been better. We want them to be healthy. The first 5 be healthy. The second 5 to be healthy. Then, that could really change the year. It's the difference between the 1-score games they lost a year ago and the 1-score games they won 2 years ago. So that's kind of what the offensive line is where they make the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, Howard, I'll defer to you because you played the position for a lot of years with the Giants. Daniel Bellinger to me is a guy that, when Waller came, Daniel was kind of forgotten about. And I think there's a lot of skill with Daniel Bellinger. I think he can excel at that position. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he's going to be a pretty good player. I don't think that people look at him as the great receiving tight end because he does so much blocking. And when people try to label you. If they throw him the ball, he catches it. He does a pretty good job blocking in the run game. So I think he's going to be great. I think Theo also is going to be pretty good. He's a much bigger kid than I thought he was. I thought he was going to be like, this kind of a receiver type tight end, like small, but he's a big kid. He carries the weight well. He blocks very well, and he's going to be a great addition as
And
tight
Theo
end.
Johnson, of course, you're talking about a Penn State
Mhm.
rookie. But yeah, like you mentioned, big tight end who's got a good catch radius, even though, a lot of his draft analysis essentially was on his blocking as well.
Yeah, and then the last tight end, what's it? Oh my goodness.
Myrick.
Yeah, he is the massive, like he's going to be a guy that's going to be in the game that if they need something extra, not just blocking, but just something extra, he's going to change a lot of people's views of the tight ends for the Giants because he's going to devastate some guys. He's a massive man.
Yeah, it's the Giants positions, we've talked about too, we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, the running back position, Devin Singletary. It was a sentimental moment for Giants fans losing Saquon Barkley in free agency to the Philadelphia Eagles. A new 26 in the building. Devin Singletary has worn 26 his entire career. So exhale, Giants fans. He's not trying to replace anyone. But this is a man who is coming off a career year in Houston. I mean, he had almost 900 yards rushing, another couple hundred on the receiving end. And it's also a running back who takes a lot of pride in blocking and pass protecting. He used to play nickel when he was coming up in football. And he says, I kind of miss playing defense, but blocking a little bit gives me that physicality that I miss and that I long for. Devin Singletary, also a guy who's very familiar with Brian Daboll, his offense, the way he runs an offense. And Daboll did say this week, he said, you know what, I will be calling plays. It's something that we knew kind of he had been doing throughout the summer and had expected, but he said definitively this season he will be calling plays. So when you add a guy like Devin Singletary, who's got that familiarity, Russ, what does that do for this offense?
Well, I like when I heard that they were getting Singletary, I was really excited about that. And let's make one thing clear. You brought it up, Madelyn. We're not talking about, he's not a new Saquon. He's Devin. He's not a new Saquon. He's Devin. He's not the same size, different kind of player. But listen, his nickname kind of tells it all. His nickname is Motor. That's what the coaches call him. And I remember him when he first came out with Buffalo. I'd say, who is this guy? I mean, he could really play. So, and then as you said, last year he had a career year. I hate to sound like a broken record with a bunch of cliches. It's all about staying healthy. I mean, think about what we're talking about. We will talk about Daniel Jones not being healthy. Daniel Jones, the quarterback, and the star running back, Saquon Barkley, the last 2-3 years, it was like, is he going to be in or is he going to be out? Is he going to be wounded or is he going to be healthy? So, I mean, to me, if Devin can play and Devin is healthy, he's small in stature, but to me, he kind of runs big, if that makes sense, Howard.
He does. He does. He has a great job. He has great balance. That quick step off the 1 foot hop and stuff when you get in the hole. The things you like to see from backs. You have a good running back room. Even Gray showed some massive improvements over the off season, during the preseason and during the training camp. And the rookie running back is coming. Well, I don't know if he's going to be healthy for the game or not, but if he's healthy,
Tyrone Tracy.
yeah, when he gets healthy. Tracy's kind of like the all-around back and can do a lot of different things. I'm like, you got a great running back room. Right now, we really have 2 guys, I think. And I don't know exactly what Tracy's status is going to be, but those 2 guys are going to be dynamic in the run game.
Yeah,
Well,
and Tyrone Tracy, of course, played wide receiver, was converted to running back late in his career. So even though he had a longer college career, he's got a lot less tread on his tires because he played running back for a much shorter part of it.
Yeah.
Well, while we're expounding on all this wonderful offensive optimism that we have, how about the defense? With
The words
Burke,
right out of my mouth, Russ. You're right.
And let's talk about the new addition from an old friend, Adoree Jackson.
Yeah, Dory Jackson is a welcome back. You know, the secondary was kind of a question. You had Banks, who was the starter, Flott, who could have been the guy on the opposite Banks, but Flott kind of got banged up, and we don't know, how healthy he's going to be. And then everybody else was just trying to fill in to make a position there. And I'm glad that they brought Dory Jackson back. You kind of hope at the end of training camp and everything's over with that a couple of veterans are going to fall off the tree, and you're going to be able to find the guy that can come in and fit your system. But out of all the positions in football, cornerback is not the position that somebody just lets a great cornerback go right away. And there will be guys out there like a Dory Jackson who are really good corners, but there won't be guys that are like, hey, man, I can't believe this guy's out in the market. They do it with safeties, but they don't do it with cornerbacks.
Right. And Dory Jackson coming into a cornerback room with the Giants that, needed a little bit of help, needed a veteran assistant last year. I mean, for the majority of his career, Dory was wearing 22. 22, of course, is Drew Phillips' number now. So Dory's going to be wearing 21 in this iteration of the Giants. But, coming back, first practice of the week, full padded practice and all that kind of stuff as they gear up for the Vikings on Sunday. And Dory even admitted, hey, it's a little different getting in football shape on a field versus staying in shape, when you're at home and working out in the gym. And so we'll see how much or how ready Adoree is for Sunday. But this is a tough test for these young corners because you got Justin Jefferson, you got Jordan Addison, you got some really skilled receivers on this Vikings team, and this young cornerback group with Cordell Flott and Tay Banks back there, seeing how they're going to be going up against
the rookies. Yeah.
And the rookies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that brings us to the people in front of them. And yeah, I don't know about you two, but I am real. We've been talking about it, and we see it in training camp and some preseason. But to see Burns and Kayvon do their thing together, that's what I'm anxious to see. I really believe that can be a dynamic duo coming from each side. But seeing is believing. I mean, the one thing about Burns, he came in, we were just talking before about leadership. Burns sounds stupid because they're all men, but Burns to me is like a man's man. The way he conducts himself on the field and in the locker room. There's a presence. When I see him, he doesn't strike me as a guy who's been here for, going into his first season. He strikes me as a guy, there's leadership. He knows what his contract is. He knows what is expected of him. And to me, he embraces anything that's coming his way. I don't think any pressure or anything is going to bother him. I think he's the guy who's going to be supplying the pressure.
Well, and like you said, supplying the pressure, and Burns and Kayvon on the edge are two very different styles and supplying the pressure, right? Kayvon has said, he's like, I'm more of like a direct down the line, just run right at pressure, where Burns is going to get you on your toes and get you off your feet and kind of keep you off balance. And having stylistically, Howard, those two differences off the edge and the way that they're able to do it, especially in a Shane Bowen defense, it's so reliant on the front four and that pressure that causes in a different way. We've talked about how Wink Martindale's defense of years past was all about blitz, blitz, blitz. There is still a lot of pressure and a lot of aggressiveness with Shane Bowen's defense, but it comes in a different way. And Howard, I'd defer to you to articulate just like how that is.
Well, blitzing is great, but you always leave somebody. You got to have the really heavy man-to-man in the back end with the safeties and corners. You've got to be able to figure out how to cover guys. What a very basic zone defense in the secondary. You can bring, if your front four guys can bring pressure, then you can really have a chance to like mess teams up, because zone is a little harder to pass against when you got four guys standing in your face every play. That's the basics of it, to be as simple as possible. But think about this. You got Burns on one side. A guy can go inside, outside, around you, beat you with the speed, dip the shoulder. And you got Thibodeau on the other side just powering over you and going around the edge. Then you got Dexter in the middle. So it's like you're starting to take away double teams all of a sudden. You can't lean hedge your bet to one side or the other. If one of the interior linemen outside of Dexter gets a little more pressure, it's going to be hard for guys to block him. Four guys at the same time standing in there. They bring a fifth guy, there'll be no matchups. There'll be a lot of, I would say, matchup nightmares, to be polite.
You bring up Dexter. I shouldn't say it amazes me, but Dexter, he just appears to be getting better and better all the time. He has really, he embraces his leadership role, but his athleticism for a guy his size is really, you don't see that too often. He just, go ahead.
Dexter looks like that big kid you always want to check his way at Pop Warner games and see how old he is. Playing with little kids. Oh, he's the same age. Like, no, he's not. He can't be.
Yeah. No, his athleticism is quite something, but he prides himself, which, everybody should be that way, but they're not. He prides himself on continuing to want to get better and better. And he's at an all-pro level. He's quite something right now.
Yeah, and he said before this season started, he said, you know what? I don't want to be a Pro Bowler by myself. That says a lot.
Yeah, he did.
Number one, he's got the confidence and the certainty and the understanding that, yes, he is a Pro Bowl player, but also he wants his play and his style to elevate his teammates so that he doesn't have to be at the Pro Bowl by himself this year. It's a great, hold on, my dog is going to get caught up in this corner.
Yeah, I mean,
On the air or her.
And also, man, thinking about the Pro Bowlers, you could potentially have 3 or 4 guys. You
Got a team full of dogs on this
there
Giants.
you go.
Somehow I expected a dog looking like that. I didn't expect you to be holding up a Rottweiler or a pit bull, Madelyn.
That'd been funny. Pit bull. Yeah, but like there could be a few Pro Bowlers. Burns could be a Pro Bowler. Thibodeau could get a Pro Bowl because he's going to have probably double-digit sacks. Dex could be Pro Bowler. I expect Bobby Okereke to get a real look after, especially if he can follow up this season like he had last year, not missing a game and kind of leading the team. So you could have a few guys, and if those guys are playing well, that'll give Banks a little more attention on the outside.
Yeah, what can we expect, Howard? What because I don't know. I mean, here's a guy who was very good, but he's been marred. His career, last few years marred by injury. What do you think we can get out of Azeez Ojulari?
Man, he's going to be the spell guy. He's going to be the guy that comes in to kind of take on the quote unquote rest periods and give these guys a break if they're in there for a long time. He also could be the guy, if possible, that they could put into the game. Back in the day when they had Justin Tuck and JPP and all those guys, and put almost like three defensive ends in the game, and one D tackle to rush the passer. So it just depends. Like, he came into the league on a pitch count. They've been trying to play him. And he's been on a pitch count, but now he has a player in front of him on both sides of the ball. On both sides of the line that he could actually. They can use his pitch count to the best of his ability. He'll still have to be able to defend against the run, because you can't hide that if he's out there and they say, okay, well, they got all their rushers, let's just run at him. So he's going to have to be able to stand up against the run, but he does have that speed and that burst that will give him a chance to really scare quarterbacks.
Well, and we're going to be seeing that first look of it all on Sunday, because the Giants hosting the Vikings week 1 at MetLife, 1 p.m. To start the season. We got to talk a little bit about this Vikings team coming in here, guys. I mean, you got Sam Darnold at quarterback. You got, we mentioned the wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, that talent there. TJ Hawkinson, their tight end, is on IR. Right now to start the season, but they've got a lot of talent of the linebackers: Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, Jonathan Grenard, some strong corners: Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, Byron Murphy. On the defensive side, just to name a few. When you look at this Minnesota team as a whole, there seem to be narrative-wise a lot of parallels with the way that the Giants are coming into 2024, which is, there's a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty as to what is the identity of this Minnesota team. So when you look at them on paper, Russ, I'll start with you here. What are you looking at on paper with this Minnesota team saying, okay, this is what I expect?
Well, you just said a mouthful in terms of uncertainty. And because of the uncertainty, I felt this when I looked at the schedule. I think the Giants, you hate to put a mark and say, well, they got to get this game. They got to get this game. But it can set a tone. I looked at the schedule and I looked at this game and I looked at the next one coming up against the Commanders, and you know how the world is, Madelyn and Howard. A good start gets everybody feeling good. It builds. Listen, winning builds confidence. Losing goes in the opposite direction. And I just felt these two games, um, the season doesn't go in doubt if they don't get them. But I think it's very important not just to get the Vikings game. It's important to get the Commanders game as well. Now, again, you know what? You can't win the Commanders game and say you won 2 in a row before you win the Vikings game. But I really listen. I think they're 2 winnable games, and not only are they 2 winnable games. And Howard, you could maybe address this, but they're games that, with this team, with so many questions surrounding it, in particular Daniel Jones, you get a good start out of these 2 games, then all of a sudden everybody's confidence and the naysayers shut up.
Well, Russ, I'll never go past the game that you're playing. That's game thing one.
Right.
I think when I look at the Vikings, though, they're not quite the team that the Giants played or we played back in 2022 or 2023, 2022 in the playoffs, because their defense is a lot better. The quarterback play may have dropped because Cousins is not there, but the defensive play, I think it has picked up a little bit. I think their defense coordinator is doing a decent job. And I think it's going to be a good test for our offensive line if they can figure out a way to really get after these guys, and if we can figure out a way to get the ball to the receivers and the tight ends and the backside of the backfield even, and run the ball with some authority, this could be a great standing point for that offensive line, for Daniel, for everybody. Defensively, it's going to be a challenge, but the defensive front is going to have to put pressure on the quarterback. Sam Darnold, high pick in the draft, great kid's been bouncing around a lot. He's probably sitting there thinking, like, I got the best receivers anybody can throw to these guys. Well, you put pressure on them, we'll see, because he's had some good receivers in the past. So they're going to have to get pressure on the quarterback constantly. And, the corners are going to have to stand up and, be known. It's going to be a lot's going to tell. A lot of the story will be told by Belton. And as a safety, he'll be trying to, organize and get these guys in the right place to try to keep these guys in check the entire game. If you can keep those guys just semi in check during the game, I do mean semi, you're going to have to double them. You have to double the guy on the outside, but the other guys aren't, world beaters. They're just very consistent. Double the big play guy, keep him in check, and then see what happens from there.
And consistency is so key in this league, as you mentioned, but you mentioned Sam Darnold too. He's on his 4th team in his young NFL career, number 3 overall pick in 2018, has a lot of talent, hasn't quite found the fit. Is this going to be the fit for him? We will see.
Hope not.
We'll see.
Not this week.
Right? Not this week. But you made a good point, Russ, too. It's like these razor thin margins. I think the biggest difference between 2022 and 2023 in the Giants realm was that in 2022, the Giants won those thin margin games. In 2023, they didn't go in their favor. And so if you get off to a strong start and you win the close games, it bodes well for the season ahead. But, this is just week 1. We got a whole season to talk about Giants football. We're ready to go. We are staying ready.
Let's go.
We are hanging out, and we'll be here every week with Giants Hangouts. Russ Salzberg, Howard Cross, I'm Madelyn Burke. Thanks for hanging out with Giants Hangouts, brought to you by Crestron. We'll see you next week.